Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're getting to start sit at the wide receiver position for every single matchup heading into week 8 of the fantasy football season. Look, you're the second half. Well past the second half, I guess I would say, of the regular season in your fantasy football leagues. I did drop some second half league winners and some second half sleepers that you can go look to acquire based on some of these matchups they have rest of season. So if you haven't checked out those videos, definitely go check them out. Again, we'll be helping you set your lineups here at the wide receiver position. Every single matchup. Today's video is brought to you by the STUNT. If you guys haven't had the chance to go check out the STUNT, it is an all-encompassing only sports social media app. So if you love Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever it is you're on, they brought all the aspects of those apps, brought it to one place, made it all about sports. We're posting exclusive content on there. So go drop OwnersBox a follow. The link to go download the app will be down below in the description. I also shared a wide receiver and running back matchups chart. Every single matchup the rest of the year I shared and looked at who had some of the best matchups the rest of the year at both of those positions. If you guys want to go check those out, we posted those over at the STUNT. But let's get into these matchups for week 8. First up, Jaguars, Steelers. A Steelers team that can definitely be had. Both these teams actually can be had in the receiving game. But more specifically with the Steelers have really struggled against outside wide receivers so far this year, which we will get into a little bit more as we get to our start and our sit at this position in this game. But it looks like Jose Jones again this week. I will be really interested to see what the dynamic is like for this team when he is back, because he was an end zone dominant target for their offense. But the Steelers obviously are a team that have struggled against receivers so far this season. They're 31st in fantasy points allowed to the position. So definitely a good matchup here for the Jaguars passing game, as long as they can handle the pass rush, because overall they're actually a top 10 defense in pass EPA. But for the Jaguars, a good defense. Actually have, I think, the best coverage grade in the league from PFF. Sometimes PFF really throws me off with some of these grades, but they have been a team that have been so good against the run. The teams have thrown the ball quite a bit against them. They're 25th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and that is why, because they are a pretty good defense, actually been very good this year, but you're going to see more pass volume from the Steelers team because Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren will not be able to run the football. So what I'll be doing here with the wide receiver position in Pittsburgh, I want to start both Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. Johnson is more of that possession guy, should definitely benefit from some increased volume, and Pickens will be that reliable guy for Kenny Pickett on those third down situations, get past the sticks, explosive plays. It was very encouraging to see Pickens put together a pretty solid performance last week against the Rams. Definitely want to go back to him here in some high passing volume for the Steelers. Now for the Jaguars, Ridley's going to be that outside guy that should benefit with some matchups with Patrick Peterson, with these outside corners of the Steelers that have really struggled in coverage this year. So Ridley should be in for a solid game. Christian Kirk has been so reliable for the Jaguars in the passing game, going back to what he was the guy he was last season. He wasn't like that in the first couple weeks. Now he is that guy. He's a player that in very, very few matchups would I really consider sitting him, so definitely a go-to start this week. Jets at the Giants, a Jets defense that it's going to be very difficult for the Giants to move the ball through the air, whether it's with Tyrod Taylor, whether it's with Daniel Jones. The Jets are the number 1 defense in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, getting a little bit healthier too at the corner spots, which should definitely help them as well. So for the Giants, should be one where Saquon Barkley is probably more of the focal point here. Running backs tend to get a lot of receptions against the Jets as well. As for the Jets offense, the Giants are a team that are definitely going to send the house at you, going to be about Zach Wilson being able to handle that. Hasn't proven in his career to be able to do it all that well, so could be a concern. But again, the Giants are a team in coverage that aren't one to be too concerned about. 23rd in fantasy points allowed to receivers, so is a positive matchup. With those Jets, Garrett Wilson is definitely going to be someone I'm starting, dominating the target share here, and with a lot of pressure coming Zach Wilson's way, he will be that reliable guy for him to look to on a down-to-down basis. These other guys, Cobb, Lazard, very few weeks would I really ever consider playing these guys unless I see Zach Wilson take a major step by the end of the season. And then with the Giants, Wan'Dale Robinson's my number 1 in terms of in positive matchups I want to play. The Jets defense is just going to take away so much from this past game. There's really nobody that I want to rely on here or expect to see a big game from these receivers. Texans at the Panthers. I think a game here for both of these offenses to find some success on the ground. But with the Texans, I mean, they have not been able to find success running the football regardless of opponents. So we'll see if the Panthers can get them right on that side of the ball. The Panthers, though, aren't too bad against the pass. 17th in fantasy points allowed, more middle of the road, 15th in EPA against the pass. The Texans, though, Last season, they were very good in fantasy points allowed to receivers. That's continued this year, the third best in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Have an excellent coverage grade as well. PFF really likes this pass defense quite a bit. So something to monitor here moving forward. I don't think it's a terrifying matchup, though, for the Panthers. And I think Bryce Young will be in a position where he's not going to be under as much pressure because the Texans pass rush has been the worst in the NFL this season. And when Young has had time to throw a clean pocket, he's like 75.8% completion percentage, which is top 9 at the quarterback position this season. So we could see the passing game and just this offense for the Panthers look a lot better in this one. Now, Adam Thielen has entered the territory of really a player that I would sit in very few matchups like Jets, Niners, maybe a couple other teams I would consider sitting Adam Thielen, but he's dominating the target share to such a high degree right now that I would definitely look to start him. But again, the Texans have not allowed a lot of points to wide receivers. So Mingo, Chark, not players I'm looking to consider. As for the Texans, it looks like Tank Dell will be back. Again, the Panthers are a team that they could be running the ball a little bit more than they have in previous weeks, take down the passing volume at least a little bit. And with Dell being out the last couple of weeks, I don't really feel completely confident going to him, but Collins is in that spot now where he's really been a reliable, consistent option. So would start him for the Texans here in this game. Patriots at the Dolphins. I'm very excited for this game, and we'll be watching this one close when it comes to some potential live betting scenarios, especially in some player props. Because if you look at this matchup that they had, I believe it was week 2 last year, the Patriots defense and their approach was really awesome and interesting to see. They played a lot of 3 high safety looks to kind of limit those explosive plays from the passing game, basically just begged the Dolphins to run the football, and they ran it really efficiently, but the Patriots managed to kind of limit their scoring and stay in this game. Now that they've shown that game plan, will they go back to it again here? Will the Dolphins have answers with some time to prepare? Should be really awesome to see. But again, the Patriots are a team pretty undermanned in their secondary with their injuries. J.C. Jackson has come back and actually played pretty well. But again, don't have much of a pass rush, haven't been great in coverage, but not a brutal defense when it comes to fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. On the Dolphins side of things defensively, I think this is more of their strength, but the numbers don't tell me they're a terrific unit against the pass. 20th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, have been able to generate a good pass rush, which could be a problem here for the Patriots and their offensive line struggles so far this season. So not one to be incredibly excited about, but about neutral to a plus, maybe narrowly a plus matchup here for the Patriots passing attack. Now, with this Patriots team, really, really jam-packed with options with Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, Demario Douglas, Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki. It makes picking out a player to actually, get on the table on and tell you to start very, very difficult, even in some decent matchups. I think Bourne would be the best option because he's consistently running routes and his target share isn't too bad. But Douglas kind of emerged last week, the rookie, who they've really, really liked all offseason as well. So it's just too crowded of a room for me to really consider playing any of these guys, especially with the amount of time that they get 2 tight ends on the field too. It really takes away from the routes of these receivers as well. On the Dolphins side of things, really no matchup you're not going to be starting Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in, so not too much to talk about as every week kind of is with this Dolphins team. Falcons at the Titans. It looks like the Titans are going to be going with a combination of Will Levis and Malik Willis in this game. I would expect to see a lot less Malik Willis, maybe if they're looking to run a little bit of RPO or some option offense where they utilize Willis's legs, because Malik Willis is just in no position to be playing NFL football. Do not think he's a capable NFL quarterback. Levis is going to start. I would expect Levis to play the majority of this game, but regardless, I'm guaranteeing you the Titans are going to lean on their ground game quite a bit, even though the Falcons are an excellent run defense. They just want to take care of the football, give their defense a chance to keep them in this game, and hopefully take care of business at home, but I think they'll definitely be very tough to do so. So it makes starting any of these receivers pretty difficult. 7th in fantasy points allowed are the Falcons this season to the wide receiver position. Have been a pretty solid defense against the pass as well as the run too. So not a lot to be excited about when it comes to this Titans offense. As for the Falcons, I think Bijan Robinson will probably be back to his regular role, not to be worried there, but it will be a tough matchup for this team to be able to run the football. The Titans are an excellent run defense, so don't expect too much from the Falcons ground game, but that means we're going to see more volume from the Falcons passing game because, again, the indication here from these numbers is the Titans so good against the run, teams are throwing the ball against them quite a bit. 24th in fantasy points allowed, 28th in EPA against the pass. Trade Kevin Byard as well, which shouldn't help their pass defense much either. And the pass rush surprisingly hasn't been great despite some of the talent they have, which should definitely help the Falcons and Desmond Ridder out. So that puts us in a spot here with Drake London to absolutely make him a start for you this week. He's definitely bounced back from the early struggles this season to be that consistent weapon for this offense, and definitely want to start him here in a matchup where they will need to throw the football more. As for the Titans, I have Hopkins listed as a start right now. What I'm seeing is, and kind of seen from previous backup quarterbacks stepping in, is that number one guy is heavily relied upon to be able to find production for them, kind of a crux and a crutch for them. So look for Hopkins to see plenty of targets. I'm not sure how much production he'll turn that into. So if you're in a full PPR league, I think he's a decent start. If you're in a half PPR league or in, a 10-team league, he's definitely not someone I want to look to, just because the ceiling I don't think is all that high, but could give you a decent floor from that reception standpoint. Vikings at the Packers. Man, this Packers offense in general has just really struggled. And I will be curious to see what LaFleur's game plan is here, because he's got a Vikings team that blitzes at the highest rate in the entire league. And Jordan Love has not been great against the blitz. He was a little bit better last week against Denver, so that might be a sign of things improving. But the Vikings have, with how much they blitz, they stack the box a ton, so it makes running the football really tough. And Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon have not been good running the football so far this year. So it might be that lean on the pass game, because again, the Vikings 25th in EPA against the pass, 26th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. So it is beneficial to throw the football against this defense. Just got to get the ball out quickly. As for the Vikings, the Packers are a team that you can find more success running the ball, but it hasn't mattered who the Vikings have played this year. They've been brutal running the football, whether it's Alexander Mattison, whether it's Cam Akers now with the team. They can't run the ball, so we could still see them lean on the pass. But the Packers, top 10 in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, a pretty solid coverage grade as well. So throwing the football might be less than efficient than it's been for the Vikings in previous matchups, but they did find a way to move the ball effectively through the air against the 49ers last week. So it's definitely more of a spot where they can still get enough done to give you a little bit of fantasy production from this passing offense. With that in mind, what I'm going to be doing is definitely starting Jordan Addison. He is that number one option for as long as Justin Jefferson is out. I can trust him from now being not just an explosive play touchdown threat to a guy that they're looking to in shorter areas of the field and the more reliant target to move the sticks. So want to start him, but with the Packers defense and how well it's been playing this year, I do want to sit KJ Osborne in this one. As for the Packers, again, I do think the passing game will be relied upon a little bit more here. So giving opportunities for Christian Watson, who a lot of people thought was going to miss a few weeks or miss some time. He's practicing in full. That's a very good sign for him. And then Romeo Doubs has been a little bit better from that down-to-down basis, getting volume, good, decent option for you in PPR formats, whereas Watson I see is more of a explosive big play threat, which the Vikings give you opportunities to do, because if that blitz doesn't get home, they don't have the numbers in coverage, they're not protecting the deep part of the field as much, and Watson could definitely take advantage. Rams at the Cowboys. This will be a real big test here for the Rams front four on both sides of the ball, because obviously the Cowboys have an excellent defensive line, one of the best in the league, and their offensive line has been playing terrific as well. So will the Rams be able to generate enough pressure on defense? Will they be able to pass protect well enough to give Matthew Stafford some time? Because we're looking at, Royce Freeman, Darrell Henderson running the football, which just isn't enough talent to be able to trust. And again, this Cowboys team, you're looking at the numbers, they're top 10 in every single category here, 6th in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position so far this season. So that'll be something to keep in mind when you're deciding on what Rams receivers to start. As for the Rams defense, actually been pretty good, 4th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this year. Definitely not what I expected to get from this team heading into the season. So it is something to pay attention to with these Cowboys receivers as well. With the Rams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Look, there's very few matchups where I wouldn't play both of these guys. I do think the passing volume will still be solid in this matchup. Stafford looks to these two, and everyone else is much of an afterthought. Nacua coming off the big game, Kupp looking to bounce back. I just can't sit either one of these guys, because they're very capable every single week of posting, 8, 9, 10 receptions, not even targets in a given game, even in a tough matchup here. As for the Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb here is someone I definitely want to start. As for Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup, they've really been competing for the wide receiver 2 role quite a bit. I don't think it's very clear that Cooks is the wide receiver 2. Gallup saw a ton of targets, turned like none of them into receptions before their bye week there against the Chargers, which was frustrating. Cooks managed to find the end zone. If you're in a pinch, I could see you wanting to play these guys, but ideally these are 2 players I would like to sit because the Cowboys have been leaning on the ground game quite a bit. They're like top 3 in the league in rushing rate this season, and that could still be the case here against this Rams defense as well. Eagles at the Commanders. You got a big divisional game here. These 2 teams played not too long ago as well. That game had a ton of points, was very competitive. The Eagles are a 7-point favorite here on the road, so expectation is they take care of business. But again, divisional game, these 2 teams have tended to play very close the last couple of years, so that's something to keep in mind. Both of these passing offenses should find success as well. Maybe not success, I should say, but you should see volume with the Commanders. The Eagles' best run defense in the league right now, so running the football next to impossible with guys like Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. Expect the passing volume to be really high here for the Commanders. Expect to see Sam Howell throwing the ball maybe 40-plus times in this game. The Eagles 30th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers because of that. They're not necessarily a terrible pass defense, but teams are throwing the ball a ton against them. That's why they're giving up all these fantasy points. As for the Commanders, defense has not been nearly as good as I expected it to be this year. 27th in EPA against the pass, 29th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So an excellent spot here for this Eagles offense, I think, across the board to find success. That definitely puts us in a spot where the Eagles pass catchers with J.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are 2 quality starts for you this week. I don't think this game gets out of hand. I don't think the Eagles run the ball incredibly efficiently because I do think the Commanders aren't a bad run defense. So look for these 2 guys to have a good game here. As for the Commanders, I think Curtis Samuel, there's a chance Curtis Samuel doesn't play. He missed some practice early in the week, is now on the field on a limited basis. We'll see what happens. Samuel would probably be someone I trust a little bit more than Jahan Dotson, but I do think all these guys could be potential starts for you this week. Dotson bouncing back the last couple of weeks with 8+ targets in each of them. So he is someone that is looking to be a bit on the come up. And again, passing volume should be very high. So Terry McLaurin's an absolute start for you. And either one, Dotson or Samuel, could be someone you play. But I would slightly lean towards Samuel if he does start and is available. Now I move to Saints at the Colts. We've got a Colts team here that is looking to continue with the big point production they had from last week against the Browns. As the Saints, a little mini bye here with a Thursday nighter, and they're throwing the ball a ton this year as well. I'm really looking and hoping to see Derek Carr push the ball downfield a little bit more, a little bit less of the check down work to Alvin Kamara that was just obscene the last couple of weeks, especially last week against Jacksonville. And Kamara's usage has just been crazy for this team, despite the passing volume too. Now, both of these defenses don't stand out in a big way against the pass. I think the Saints are really good, though. 6th in EPA against the pass, 80.3 coverage grade. So I do think this is a team that you're going to want to avoid with a lot of wide receivers, but we'll get into a little bit more when we get to the start sit. The Colts, though, their defense hasn't really been great across the board. 15th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, more middle of the road. Coverage grade isn't great. They just don't have a lot of talent in their secondary. So is an opportunity here for the Saints to find something in the passing game. And with that being the case, I do want to be playing Chris Olave, despite what seemed like a little bit of a spat with Derek Carr. I don't know if you guys were watching the game on Thursday last week. Just the frustration Carr had with him a little bit, but he's still getting a ton of targets, a ton of opportunities. And Carr typically does like to throw the ball downfield quite a bit. I think he still is like leading the league in passes of 20+ air yards, and Olave is the direct beneficiary there. Plus matchup, I think, for the passing game. So Michael Thomas is still someone I want to start, but Rashid Shaheed, not quite good enough of a matchup for me to go to him here, despite his production. Now for the Colts, Marshawn Lattimore being in coverage for this secondary has made them really, really good against outside wide receivers, shutdown group there. So Michael Pittman is someone I do want to avoid, but been getting crushed by slot wide receivers. They're giving up over 15 fantasy points a game to slot wide receivers, bottom 3 in the entire league. Josh Downs off a big week. I think you can go back to him here. I think you could see another big week for him. So he is someone I do want to start. Browns at the Seahawks, 2 teams that are playing really well defensively right now. The Browns in specific, 2nd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 3rd in EPA against the pass, have that terrific pass rush to be able to generate a ton of pressure and make things miserable for opposing quarterbacks efficiency-wise. Run defense has taken a little bit of a step back, so we could see, if Kenneth Walker is available, Zach Charbonnet, those guys find some success on the ground, take a little bit of volume away from the passing game. As for the Seahawks, Their fantasy points allowed, 28th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. A lot of that comes down to the fact that they've been so good against the run. They're giving up like 80 yards per rushing yards per game and just 3.5 yards per carry. So teams are throwing the ball at a bit of a high volume. Have looked good though, I should say, across the board defensively the last 2 weeks. The Cardinals, we saw a good amount of points in the first half, shut them down in the second half. Same goes for the Bengals. They've been a great second half defense so far this year. Making second half adjustments, they've just been so good. 9th in EPA against the pass, despite, again, the fantasy points allowed being pretty high. Now, the question is here for the Seahawks, who is playing at the wide receiver position? Tyler Lockett hasn't been practicing. I think he may miss. Jackson Smith and Jigba could get opportunity in an elevated wide receiver 2 role, but the Browns' pass defense is really tough to get a handle on when it comes to production. So do want to avoid starting either of those two, but DK Metcalf, I think he's going to play, and the Browns play a ton of man coverage, one of the highest rates in the league, and DK has been terrific against man coverage in his career. Obviously, with his size and downfield contested catch ability, he can produce for you, so I do want to start him if he plays. As for the Browns, with PJ Walker being at quarterback, again here, that's my expectation at least. I'd be shocked if Deshaun Watson plays. Cooper has been hyper-targeted for this offense, but obviously did not produce last week. I'd be willing to go back to him here because of the passing volume and the fact that the Browns probably won't be able to run the ball too well and will need to lean on the pass. Doesn't quite have me that excited to play Elijah Moore because, again, I do respect this Seahawks defense and do think it is good, so him and DPJ are guys I do want to sit. Chiefs at the Broncos. Saw this game a couple of weeks ago, getting this one again. We saw the Chiefs be really successful in their rushing game. That'll be something to pay attention to here when considering what wide receivers to start. But the Broncos across the board defensively have not been great. Dead last in EPA against the pass. Haven't generated much of any pass rush so far this season as well. That's a problem. Should definitely help the Chiefs across the board in their offense. As for the Chiefs, they're a team that you've definitely got to respect here defensively. Have been great in the pass game. First in EPA against the pass, 9th in fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Definitely something to monitor moving forward playing this team. Thought of them as a great offense and kind of a mediocre defense. Offense is still great, and the defense is turning out to be great this season as well. Even with their defense playing as well as it is, though, I do think Courtland Sutton is someone to kind of start pretty much week in and week out. He has been that reliant go-to option in the end zone and in the red zone. He's top of the league in end zone targets right now this year, or right in the top 3. So that is very, very valuable from a fantasy perspective. And that leaves Jerry Jeudy in a spot where he's not dominating the target share anymore, and he's not that guy in that area of the field to get those touchdowns and score those big-time fantasy points. So he is someone I do want to sit here because, again, think the Chiefs' pass defense has been great. As for the Chiefs' offense and their receivers, Rashee Rice getting on the field now, he is proving to give you production. He did it against the Broncos a couple weeks ago. He did it just last week as well against the Chargers, finding the end zone too. So love him in this matchup. Sky Moore, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, they're getting on the field. They're not getting enough targets per route run for me to feel confident playing them, as again, the Chiefs probably will find some success in the ground game and might not see as high of a passing volume as we've seen in previous weeks. Bengals at the 49ers, one of the more exciting games on the week. I expect the Bengals to probably be a pretty big public underdog in this one on the road at San Francisco. I think I saw something about the Niners having not lost at home and maybe like 10 or covered the spread in maybe 10 straight home games. Crazy, but we're going to see probably Sam Darnold here. There is a chance Purdy plays because his concussion, like the symptoms he had came when he was on the plane, not during the game. I wonder if that'll have an impact. If they were less severe, maybe he can play. I think he did practice yesterday. I'm recording this Friday morning, and maybe he gets out of protocol, but not many players have. So I would expect to see probably Sam Darnold this week. Doesn't have a huge impact for me. The Bengals defense hasn't been overwhelming this year. I do like Lou Anarumo, and as a defensive coordinator, definitely think he puts together a great game plan, but more of a middle-of-the-road defense so far this season against the pass. As for the 49ers, an elite defense across the board here, 5th in EPA against the pass, generates such a great pass rush. And it's definitely a difficult matchup when it comes to creating explosive plays against this defense. They keep everything in front of them. So it's really relying upon, can you get the volume to be able to give enough production here? And what kind of offense are we going to see from the Bengals here as they've struggled so far this season too? Now, I will be starting Jamar Chase in this particular matchup, but T. Higgins, 3 straight games now of only 2 receptions. Look, in a tough matchup, I just cannot trust him right now, and that's exactly what the Niners defense is. Higgins might struggle to generate some of those explosive plays, which will be a problem for him if we don't see him pick up those reception numbers. Not willing to take the chance on him in this type of matchup. As for the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk is going to be a start regardless of the quarterback. I don't think Deebo Samuel is going to be playing. He's missed practice a few days in a row now, and then that leaves Juwan Jennings and Ray McLeod stepping up into the 2 and 3 roles, but those aren't players that I would be relying upon given where we're at in the season. Ravens at the Cardinals. Kyler Murray came off the injury report, no injury designation, but it hasn't given me the expectation that he's going to play this week. It might be another week or two. So it looks like it's going to be Josh Dobbs at quarterback. And man, the Ravens defense has been fantastic this year across the board, run and the pass, top 5 in fantasy points allowed to receivers, second in EPA against the pass, and at 90.3 coverage grade. I believe that's the second best in the league. Only things missing in is the pass rush, but the Cardinals haven't been great in pass pro either, so they could find some success there. As for the Cardinals defense, they've been bad across the board, run or pass. I do think the Ravens will probably lean a little bit more in their ground game. They threw the ball a ton last week, but they knew that the Lions were so good against the run that they needed to lean on Lamar Jackson's arm. Here, I don't think we see that quite as much, so we won't see the same volume we saw last week, and that'll have an impact on my start-sit decisions here. But again, 27th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, 31st in EPA against the pass. One of the worst coverage grades in the league as well, so it is a plus matchup across the board here for the Ravens offense. But like I said, what I will be doing is not leaning too much on these pass catchers for fantasy production. Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman are guys I do want to sit because I don't think the passing volume will be as high as it was last week, but Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews are those top 2 options. I would still be starting Flowers here as that number 1 guy at the receiver spot for this team. The Cardinals, though, look, if Michael Wilson can't get me a productive week in a really plus matchup last week, I'm not going to trust him to do it here. I do think Marquise Brown, though, is dominating when it comes to target share and the reliance he's so relied upon by Josh Dobbs. I think I can start him because, again, the Cardinals can't run the ball. Mari DiMercado, Keontae Ingram, whoever it is at running back, don't have a lot of talent at the running back spot, and the Ravens are excellent against the run, and the Cardinals are big underdogs in this one, 9.5-point underdogs, so I do think there's enough here for Brown to produce, but Wilson and Moore are guys I will not be playing. Now we get to our primetime games. Bears, Chargers. We've got a Chargers team that is a little bit banged up. Josh Palmer hasn't been practicing. Hopefully he gets onto the field on Friday because the Chargers could really use him. The Bears are not as bad of a run defense as when it comes to what they've given up fantasy points wise. They're pretty solid. They're like top 10 in EPA against the run. But against the pass have not been nearly as good. 29th in EPA against the pass, 58.1 coverage grade. Don't really have any pass rush. That should really help Justin Herbert here with some time to throw. So look for the Chargers to find some success in their passing game there. They haven't run the ball effectively either, so we could see a big game for them in the passing game. As for the Bears, looks like we'll see another week of Tyson Bagent. I didn't start DJ Moore last week, and it was a pretty solid guy to sit, but the Chargers are just the worst pass defense in the entire league, 32nd in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, so could see Bagent be even better throwing the football. He was all right. He put up like 180 or so yards, was pretty high completion percentage, but they aren't trusting him to do too much downfield. Could change here. Who knows? The Chargers have been so bad against the pass. So like I said, DJ Moore is a guy I sat last week. Definitely going to go back to him this week. But we could still see the Bears lean on their ground game because, again, with Tyson Bagent, and they ran it so effectively the previous week against the Raiders, the Chargers aren't a great run defense. So no Darnell Mooney, no Tyler Scott, that's for sure. As for the Chargers, if Josh Palmer plays, if he is on the field, I'm absolutely starting him here because, again, it's really Allen Palmer. Quentin Johnston is not taking away opportunities from either of these guys. Even if Palmer doesn't play, I'm not starting Quentin Johnston. We're seeing the 7th rounder from TCU and Darius Davis being more productive than the 1st rounder in Quentin Johnston. So that tells you all you need to know. That doesn't mean start Darius Davis if Josh Palmer is out. This will probably just mean a lot of Keenan Allen, a lot of Gerald Everett, and a ton of Austin Eckler in the receiving game as well. So if Josh Palmer is out, it doesn't mean I'm going to be going to any other options, but if he does play, him and Allen are going to be great players to start. And finally, we move to Monday Night Football, the Raiders at the Lions. The Lions falling back here in a lot of these numbers when it comes to their pass defense after what we saw from the Ravens last week. Now, this is, again, a team that's great against the run, so teams will throw the football quite a bit against them. 18th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers now on the season, and basically everything here is about middle of the pack in terms of their grade amongst the rest of the league. As for the Raiders, they're a team that I think the Lions will have no problems moving the ball however which way they kind of decide to do so. Even with David Montgomery out, Jahmyr Gibbs can definitely take care of business there. The Raiders are 8th in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, which is surprising to see, but 24th in EPA against the pass. So whatever the Lions look to do, I think they'll be able to do effectively in their offense. That puts me in a position where Amon-Ra St. Brown will definitely be someone you're obviously going to be starting every week. Now, Josh Reynolds ran like 42 routes, only saw 2 or 3 targets. That's not a good sign, especially now with Jameson Williams entering the fold. I don't want to start either one of these guys because, again, I do think you look at the fantasy points allowed the Raiders have given up this season, and then you also look at the fact that I think that the Lions will be able to run the ball effectively and lean on it more than they did last week against the Ravens. As for the Raiders offense, I think Adams and Myers are going to be great starts, especially if Jimmy Garoppolo is starting in this one. These are 2 guys that have been very, very consistent this year. Myers has been great in this matchup. Will need to throw the football a ton. Both of these guys are going to be great starts. All right, that is every single matchup for week 8 of the fantasy football season, helping you set your lineups for week 8. Again, if you guys have any questions about these players, if you have start-sit decisions you need to make, do my best to answer those down below in the comments. So would love to hear from you guys. And as well, if you enjoyed today's video, would really, really appreciate it if you did hit that like button to let me know I should keep getting this style of content to you. And if you're new, hit that subscribe button. We're posting fantasy football content every single day here on the YouTube channel. Guys, if you also want to join us on Sundays, we are live on the OwnersBox Twitch channel on Sundays, reviewing all these games, getting the latest injury updates, making our favorite bets for the week. So come hang out with us there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.